Hi, I'm Bing Liu. In this presentation, I will explore my standpoint and personality and examine how I understand Indigenous education. I will also explain why critical reflection, self-reflection is not only necessary but a professional responsibility for teachers. Rather than positioning myself as a neutral observer, I want to reflect on how my background and my educational experiences and the knowledge system I have been exposed to have shaped the way I understand original and Torres Strait Islander perspectives. Who I am. As an international student from China, I didn't grow up within the Australian historical or cultural context. When I first arrived in Australia, I had very limited structured understanding of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander historical and cultures. And I initially found this quite unfamiliar. This made me realize that the issues was not simply what I didn't know, but why this knowledge had been largely absent from my previous education. In other words, my understanding is not neutral, but shaped by a system of knowledge that has already been selected and filtered. My positionality influences not only what I know, but also what I consider to be important or valid knowledge. Nakata describes this through the concept of cultural interface where different knowledge systems interact within an equal power relations. This made me realize that I may have unconsciously prioritized certain forms of knowledge while overlooking others. Similarity, McIntosh highlights that people often carry an assumption that shapes how they interact the world. This led me recognize that my understanding may not be neutral, but shaped by a familiar framework that I have taken for granted. Don't suggest that many questions asked by non-Indigenous people reflect underlying assumptions rooted in their own perspectives. This made me realize that misunderstanding is not only about a lack of knowledge, but also about the ways in which knowledge is framed. As Prond and Morgan argue, critical self-reflection is a foundational skill for teachers, as it allows us to identify and challenge this assumption. It also made me aware that even the way I ask questions may already carry certain assumptions. Through this reflection, I began to understand that education is not a neutral system. Ruffin and Brown explain that schooling in Australia has developed within a colonial text, shaping which knowledge is recognized and valued. This made me realize that knowledge I have received is not naturally formed, but selectively structured. Modi also demonstrated that racism continues to affect the schooling experiences of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students. This suggests that education is not only a space for learning, but also a space where social structures are within this context. Adding Indigenous context into the curriculum does not necessarily to meaningful change. When Indigenous perspectives are represented only through isolated topics or cultural symbols, this may appear inclusive but can still reinforce existing knowledge structure. Issues of representation are also reflected in language use. Roberts emphasize the importance of using respective and curious terminology and recognizing the diversity of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. However, beyond correctness, language also reflects people power and representation. When complex groups are reduced to simplified labels, this can limit how they understood. Uh, from a policy perspective, teachers have a clear responsibility. The authors requires educators to understand and embed Indigenous perspectives in their teaching. However, I have come to realize that meeting these requirements does not necessarily result in meaningful change. MacDonald argued that meaningful practice requires a relational approach, where knowledge is understood in connection with culture and community. This suggests that teaching is not only about following policy, but about understanding their deeper purpose. In my future teaching, I don't want to simplify either indigenous context, but to rethink how I understand knowledge itself. This means continuously reflecting on my positionality, and recognizing that this process has no clear endpoint. Uh, uh, I will avoid limiting indigenous perspective to specific topics and instead integrate them meaningful across the curriculum. Mm. I will draw on culturally responsive pedagogy and to support inclusive learning. More importantly, I have come to accept that there may not a single correct way to teach, but rather on an ongoing process of learning and adjustment. In conclusion, my positionality shapes how I understand and teach, which makes a critical self-reflection essential. As a teacher, my responsibility is not only to deliver knowledge, but to continuously reflect on the knowledge system I am a part of and the impact they may have. Thank you.